correspondence received from the Chief Executive Officer of the Child and Family Agency Tusla in response to the Committee's request for further information regarding the use of unregulated accommodation and accommodation for unaccompanied minors, dated the 27th of April 2026. Do members wish yet to discuss this? I know Deputy Farrelly had flagged this.
Thanks, Chair. I know we discussed it previously once the RTÉ Prime Time Investigation had aired a couple of weeks back as well. To be honest, I think, and I'm conscious of Deputy McAuliffe's points, which are very well made with regards to getting into the weeds of policy. But I do think there would be a prudent piece of work for this committee to do with regards to the financial arrangements that Tusla has embarked on with private companies with regards to special emergency arrangements. And I think that, very specifically, I think warrants further investigation by way of a starting point by asking Tusla to provide and furnish the committee with details of all contracts that it has been part of over the last 3 to 5 years, let's say. Because what we see is while now in the last number of months a reduction in numbers of children and young people staying in special emergency arrangements, that wasn't the case, and I just have question marks over the value for money, the best practice. This is an issue that in isolation Ireland isn't dealing with alone, and I would also like to see what efforts Tusla has made to learn from colleagues in other European countries as to the best practice approach and the modelling in how we can ensure a needs-based and rights-based approach to accommodation for children and young people, and also for those that maybe we can't be fully sure of their age.
Yep, Deputy Kagan.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, look, some of the facts provided in the Tusla report, I think, really shine a light on an issue that, to my mind at least, first emerged in this committee almost a year ago now, when we had the CEO of Tusla here, and myself and yourself were questioning her about unaccompanied minors and how Tusla's responsibility for that and the impact of that on the agency. Like, if these were any other children, like if there were 300 children in the last 4 years, 300 people in the last 4 years placed in child-based settings that subsequently turned out to be adults, there'd be an absolute national outcry. Like, that is the reality here. And the average length of stay for 300 people who arrived into this country seeking international protection, who were placed in child-based settings, was 60 days. So there were over 300 adults over the last 4 years placed in very specialised type of accommodation, which, let's be frank, this is not Tusla's job. Tusla is responsible for looking after some of the most vulnerable, challenged children in this state. And we all know, and Deputy Farrell's alluded to it, the challenges they face in providing the appropriate accommodation for those children. Of course, there are children seeking international protection in this country that undoubtedly fall within that category of trauma that should be placed in those types of settings. But in a lot of other cases, the type of children arriving seeking protection here, it's a very different set of scenarios. Their age is a very different set of scenarios, and their length of stay is very different. Like, I really think we have to probe this further with the Department of Justice. It's clear that the changes that have been introduced has resulted in a shorter time period when they're assessing the age of a person. The Department of Justice, as you'll recall, Chair, really didn't even want to acknowledge that they even had a legal responsibility for carrying out age assessment. It was only that we pushed them. None of the officials even knew that they had that legal responsibility. And all of a sudden they're now taking it on board, which I acknowledge is welcome. But there's two things here. One is financial. Like, this is imposing a significant burden on Tusla, and they acknowledged it here. The official for Tusla, when they were before this committee, acknowledged that when they go out to tender to provide certain types of accommodation, in many cases it's the same providers that are providing home-based care, or residential-based care that Tusla are providing for some of the most vulnerable children. Like, I really do think we need to examine this further with the Department of Justice, get clarity on some of the figures that they've provided, which to some extent contradict some of the figures that Tusla provided, and what is the long-term plan here? Because, to my mind, and again, without straying too much into government policy, but I do think it impacts on the financial side of the house for Tusla. It should be the responsibility for IPAS to accommodate most, if not all, children that are seeking international protection, and this shouldn't be left to Tusla. And I think these figures starkly illustrate this issue. Thanks, Chair.
Deputy McAuliffe.
Yeah, actually, I suppose it brings together the two previous contributions, because I think they combine. As Deputy Geoghegan says, we have people who are, it's unclear if they fall under the age of 18 or not, and as a result then they may have to be placed in, and it's sort of the indication is that it's a very specific group that's placed in special emergency accommodation, although we never got a full profile of the type of children that were being placed in that. My understanding is that many of them might have included people who were either who were here as a result of the war in Ukraine or who were on international protection. The figure alone for special emergency arrangements of, I think, approximately €750,000 per child was really an eye-watering figure. And when you compare it to the overall budgetary figure for foster care and payments, which a number of people here referenced, the value for money for the two seemed to be totally at odds. My suggestion, Chair, is that maybe during our next private session we would draft a list of questions and that we might direct them to a number of different government departments on this, because I think both Deputy Farrelly and Deputy Geoghegan have touched on sort of 2 or 3 departments and agencies that have responsibility here, and I think PAC could have a role in trying to coordinate what's actually happening on the ground, because it's very, very serious. And as Deputy Geoghegan has says, the idea that you might have adults placed in a child setting, and we're not still clear about what settings they exactly are. Are they commune facilities, or are they special emergency accommodation arrangements where there's no potential for interaction with children? So I think maybe at our private session we should draft a list of questions with the idea of reserving the right to hold a hearing on the matter.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, Deputy Bennett. Then
just going back into relation to that, of course I want to see the very, very best for the children, but I'm just worried in relation to our remit here in the PAC. We're here to ensure that the general public is getting the best value for money. I don't know if it's within our remit that we should be contacting the Department of Justice to make sure that they're doing their job. Who is over that? That should be the Minister that is ensuring that is happening and that government policy is working. As far as I can see, we're here for the PAC to ensure we're getting the best value for money. I'm just wondering where, maybe I can be guided on that, please.
Yeah. Deputy Neville.
Yeah, I think that, Deputy Brennan, I think that's what we're trying to do here, because there is impacts, and I think obviously, look, the least part of this risk here is probably financial risk, that people who are ending up in a toothless situation when they shouldn't be, and there's a financial element to that. But I suppose obviously what the primary concern is the risk to the other children, where you do have people pretending to be children, gaming the system. Maybe seeing a weakness in the system where they feel if they come in, they get children, they'll have more rights and entitlements, and that's a disgrace. Obviously, that's happening by those people, and if anybody found in that, I presume should be the first people out the door if they are doing that, because they are causing real risk. And we've seen what damage that has happened, what happened in the past, and there should be no truck for anyone. And I presume, I'd like to think that any of those 300 people were sent straight back on a plane to wherever they might have came from, if they did do that, enter in with children when they shouldn't have, if that was the case. So I'd like to see what repercussions there were for those individuals, but that's a separate point entirely. But at the same time, we have to be very strong on this, and there should be zero tolerance for it. But nonetheless, and I think I suppose maybe with our 2 hats on, and the main hat obviously being our as public representatives who care for the people in the country and the children in the country, we need to make sure that there isn't a mix of adults in with children where there shouldn't be. But as I said, I suppose to Deputy Bennett's question is what's the relevance for us here? Well, there's that primary relevance, but also look, you've got people operating in Tusla. We have to ensure that where our funding is supposed to be going is going where it should be. It's supposed to look after children, not people pretending to be children, as we had in this case.
Okay. Just a few comments from myself, and certainly, I mean, this sets off alarm bells on so many different levels, both in terms of regulation, both in terms of finance as well. And we know in 2025 it cost the state some 38 million to provide accommodation in the special emergency accommodation right across the state. So I think we need to get sight of that, what kind of tendering process, what type of facilities. I know from the RTÉ Prime Time Investigates, I mean, some of the accommodation, hotels, minors in hotel accommodation over a number of, months and in some cases years. But, I suppose the other really concerning part of that is the unregulation of, the accommodation, these accommodation settings. And that, to me, highlights a series of failures there in terms of the protection of some of the most vulnerable children within the state, coupled with, I suppose, this quite concerning figure of 300 individuals who presented as minors that then, following a lengthy process, were established to be actually adults over the age of 18. And we've seen that, some of the potential fallout from that quite recently in one of these centres in Dublin. So it's quite concerning. The costs, the fact that these are unregulated settings, exposing children to further potential risk. The other concerning element there is Tusla said there's no legal basis provided for in legislation for them to carry out any verification or age profiling. And we know that, look, I mean, certainly when we had the department in and we had Tusla in, neither seemed to know who was responsible or what roles were in place. And the fact that Tusla have been carrying out some of this work, I'd question the constitutionality of that if there is no legal basis as provided for in legislation to do that. So I think we need to get clarity from the department with regard that and the role that Tusla has played. But it is really, really concerning that 300 adults have been in accommodation. I think we need to get sight of those individuals, how long they have stayed, whether it was mixed accommodation, and what type of accommodation they were in over a very, very lengthy period of time. The average is 60 days, which is really concerning. So unless there's any other members wishing to come in. Okay, so is it agreed then to note and publish this item? Agreed.
Thank you for watching. Please like and share.